Prapanchapasamang Shantang Shivam Advaitang Chaturthang Manante. You must remember that I have already mentioned this slok, which is there in the 7th slok of Mandukya Upanishad. You have heard me mentioning about it some time back in the beginning of today's discussion. This is from Mandukya Upanishad, and this particular Upanishad called Mandukya Upanishad, which is shortest in terms of number of sloks, it has only 12 sloks. But this Upanishad is also considered the most powerful of all Upanishads. It comes along with the Mandukya Karika written by Gaurapadacharya, who is Shankaracharya's guru's guru, that is grand guru, like grandfather, Shankaracharya's guru is Govindopad Acharya, and Govindopad's guru is Gaurapadacharya. The Karika has 4 chapters. The Agama Prakarana, the first chapter, has 29 verses. The second chapter, or the Poitatha Prakaran, has 38 verses. The Advaita Prakaran, or the third chapter, has 48 verses. And the last, which is known as the Alad Shanti Prakaran, it has 100 verses. All the 12 sloks of Mandukya Upanishad are there in the first chapter, or the Agama Pariprakaran of the Mandukya Karika. Mandukya Upanishad is important because it provides a detailed description of the Om mantra and also meticulously investigates the very nature of our core identity, or what we call self. Now, let's find out what they say about Om. In the first slok of Mandukya Upanishad, we find this slok. Om itte tadakkharamidang sarvam tasyapo vyakhyanang bhutang bhavat bhavishyatiti sarvaonkhareva jachachanat trikalatitang tatoppankareva. To those who are intellectually mature and spiritually untrained, this declaration may appear to be scandalously absurd at the first glance, because not only it is quite revolutionizing, but here, there's a suddenness of truth, a strange blast upon the canvas of what you call reality. That's there in this first slok of Mandukya Upanishad. Om itte tadakkharamidang sarvam tasyapo vyakhyanang bhutang bhavat bhavishyaditi sarvamankareva jachachanat trikalatitang tattvapankareva. Here, what the Rishi says? He says that the word Om represents in its symbolism everything that's registered and experienced by your perception, the past, the present, the future, everything. Not only the manifest world of plurality, but also its substratum, the unmanifest world. In a nutshell, this Om mantra, according to the Rishi, represents everything. Now, here you find the word Trikalatitam. That means it's beyond time. Now, what do you mean by time? The concept of time is a trick of the reference frame from the standpoint of physics, and a trick of the mind when spiritually investigated. Where there's no mind, the concept of time also does not function there. But the mind, itself, it is also a matter too. And when the mind is in conjunction with life, it gains a similitude of activity in its sentience, and conscience. Now, subjectively, it can be said that Om necessarily represents not only the matter envelopments in us, but also the spiritual center behind it all. Okay? Got the point? So, in the first slok, we get to know what we mean by the word Om. Now, in the second slok of the Mandukya Upanishad, the Rishi is investigating the self. The second slok, what the second slok of Mandukya Upanishad tells? Sarvang hetad brahma, ayamatma brahma, shohayamatma chatushpat. Look, here we find ayamatma brahma, one of the signature sentences of all the Upanishads. What does it mean? It means that all this is verily Brahma. This Atma is Brahma, and the Atma has 4 quarters. In the last part, that is Shohayamatma Chatushpat, this is where I found the seed of my explanation why I regard Ramnarayan Ram more valuable and powerful than the mantra Om. Now we know that Om is everything, and Om is Atma. And finally, this Atma has 4 distinguishable quarters, or 4 different aspects, or you can call it 4 distinct fields of activities. Shohayamatma Chatushpat. Got it? Now, what are these 4 quarters? Chatushpat, Chatushpat, 4 quarters, 4 halves, 4 different aspects. If you analyze your subjective life, you will find that there are 3 planes of consciousness in which you reveal daily: the waking state, the dream state, and the deep sleep state. Your entire life story is nothing but the summation of these 3 states. Either you are awake, or you are dreaming, or you are in the deep sleep state. In the third slok says, Jagorita sthana bahipragya saptanga ekonabinshati mukha sthulabhuk paishyanara prathamapada. The Rishi here names the Jagorita sthana, or the waking state, as Bahipragya or Vishwa. Similarly, in the fourth slok of Mandukya Upanishad, we find Shapna sthana antapragya saptanga ekonabinshati mukha prabhiviktabhuk taijasa dityapada. Here, what it says? It says your dream state is described as antapragya or taijasa. Now in the fifth slok, we find the mention of the deep sleep state as Sushupti or Pragya. The fifth slok states what it says: Jatra Shupta na kanchan kamang kamayate, na kanchan shapnang pashyati, tat Sushuptam. Sushupta sthano eki bhuta pragyana ghana, evanandamaya nandabhuk, chetamukha pragyostritiyo pada. I am here not going into the technical details of this slok or all the above 3 sloks. In the current context of discussion, we stick to the description of the 3 states of waking as the first quarter, the Vishwa, the dreaming state, the Taijas, as the second quarter, and the deep sleep state as the third quarter, the Pragya. Yes, in the 6th slok of Mandukya Upanishad, it is said, Esha Sarveshwar Esha Sarvagya Esha Antarjamesha Jani Sarvasya Prabhavapo Hi Bhutanam. This deep sleep state is a condition in which neither the organs of knowledge function nor the knowledge acts. At such a moment, we seem to be generally in a strange dream, which is unknown to us. The Rishi here says that our awareness in the deep sleep state is a homogeneous mass of pure consciousness. illuminating nothing in particular except giving a sense of pure blissfulness. The Vedantians, especially the Advaita Vedantians, in their language, say that in this deep sleep state, the self is identifying with the state of Sarveshwar, that divine spark of pure light which is ever vibrant within each and every one of us. Now, let's come to the most important slok of the Mandukya Upanishad, the seventh slok. What it says? Nanta pragyam, na bahi pragyam, na uvayata pragyam, na pragyana ghanam, na pragyam, na pragyam. Adrishtam. I am breaking. It's a long. It's a long sentence. I am breaking it into different parts. Adrishtam, avyavaharjam, agrajyam, alakshanam, achintam, avyapadeshomekatta pratyasharam. Prapancha prasamam, shantam shivam advaitam, chaturtham varnante. Sa atta, sa vigyo. This is one of the most powerful sloks in the entire canon of all the Upanishadic texts. I have already given some ramifications of this slok in the beginning of today's discussion. What I want to point now is again here we are confronted with the idea of four states. Here it is called Chaturtham Manante. That is, they are stressing upon the point that there are four different aspects. The slok says that the true Atma is neither the one we find in the waking state, nor Bahipragyam, nor that which is conscious of the internal subjective world, Nanta Pragyam, nor that which is in the deep sleep state, nor Pragyana Ghanam. It is not even something in between, nor a simple consciousness, and neither is it unconscious. Novayata Pragyam, na Pragyam, na Pragyam. According to the Rishi or the Rishis of the Mandukya Upanishad, it is unseen by any sense organs, beyond empirical dealings, incomprehensible by the mind, uninferable, unthinkable, indescribable, and essentially of the self alone. This is what Gaurapadacharya calls as Turiya or the fourth state. Now, let's come to the most important slok of the Mandukya Upanishad, the seventh slok. What it says? Nanta pragyam, na bahi pragyam, na uvayata pragyam, na pragyana ghanam, na pragyam, na pragyam. Adrishtam. I am breaking. It's a long. It's a long sentence. I am breaking it into different parts. Adrishtam, avyavaharjam, agrajyam, alakshanam, achintam, avyapadeshomekatta pratyasharam. Prapancha prasamam, shantam shivam advaitam, chaturtham varnante. Sa atta, sa vigyo. This is one of the most powerful sloks in the entire canon of all the Upanishadic texts. I have already given some ramifications of this slok in the beginning of today's discussion. What I want to point now is again here we are confronted with the idea of four states. Here it is called Chaturtham Manante. That is, they are stressing upon the point that there are four different aspects. The slok says that the true Atma is neither the one we find in the waking state, nor Bahipragyam, nor that which is conscious of the internal subjective world, Nanta Pragyam, nor that which is in the deep sleep state, nor Pragyana Ghanam. It is not even something in between, nor a simple consciousness, and neither is it unconscious. Novayata Pragyam, na Pragyam, na Pragyam. According to the Rishi or the Rishis of the Mandukya Upanishad, it is unseen by any sense organs, beyond empirical dealings, incomprehensible by the mind, uninferable, unthinkable, indescribable, and essentially of the self alone. This is what Gaurapada Charya calls as Turiya, or the fourth state. Vis-a-vis the self or the Atma, the mantra Om, which is actually Atma, as has been stated earlier, must also have similar aspects of four or Chatuspat. In the 8th sloka of Mandukya Upanishad, what we find is Sho Hayo Matta Akkhadakkara Munkara Dhimatrang Pada Matra Matrascha Pada Akara Ukara Makara Iti, which means that the same Atma is again Om from the point of view of the syllables. The letters here are O, U and Ma, which when grammatically combined gives the mantra Om. In the next 9th, 10th and 11th mantra of the Mandukya Upanishad, the Rishi establishes the identity of the waking state of the self with O. What it says? Jagarita sthana vaishya narahakara prathama matra aptera adimattada apnoti ha vai sarvan kaman adischa bhavati ja evam veda. Similarly, in the 10th slok we find Shapnas thanas taijas ukaro ditya matratkarsha aduvaya tatpa utkarshati havai jnana santating samanascha bhavati nasya brahma vedkulya bhavati ya evam veda. Here the syllable U is rendered equivalent to the dream state or the Tuija state. And likewise the pronunciation Ma is corresponding the counterpart of the deep sleep state or the Pragya state, and which is stated in the 11th slok of the Mandukya Upanishad. We find in the 11th slok of the Mandukya Upanishad Shushupta sthana pragya makaras tritiya matra mitero piterva minuti hava idang sarvam pitischa bhavati yah evam veda. And the 12th or the last slok of Mandukya Upanishad says अमात्रस् चतुर्थ व्यवहार्य प्रपंचवशम शिवोद्वैत एवं ओंकार अद्वैप संविशत्तात्मानं यो एवं वेद. Here it says that which has no parts, the soundless, it is the fourth quarter. Now the problem is you are talking about four distinct parts, but it is clearly seen that the mantra Om consists of only three parts. Now what my Thakur has blessed us with is Ram Narayan Ram. In contrast to the first A in the Omkar, which represents the waking state, the first Ram in my Thakur's Ram Narayan Ram represents the dream state instead of the waking state. In Thakur's language, it may be called as Pebassato Atanditasa Samabamba Brahmasya Janati Ramasati Karsa Samasam Vedasya Somi Vedarasapi Apastiso Akasas Samastisama. Look, this is an extraordinary move from my Thakur. The Narayan in Ram Narayan Ram represents the waking state. The first Ram represents the dream state. As the dream state is so powerful and so described as Tejas, so starting with the dream state gives Ram Narayan Ram much power at the very outset. For my Thakur, the dream state has always been the state of prominence over his waking state. In the dream state, you can float in the air, walk on wet water, which you can't in your normal waking state. For my Thakur, from his very childhood, the dream state was always found to be merged with the waking state. Let me narrate an incident, okay, from Thakur's childhood days. My Thakur was then a little child of 6 years. The office in which my Thakur's father, Surendra Chandra Chakraborty, worked was Rup Babu. It was known as Rup Babu's Kachari. Understood? Rup Babu was a renowned Jomidar of that period. The manager of that office was Trilok Kosham, who was called the Naib of the office, and the families of my Thakur and that of Trilok Kosham were next door neighbors. I visited that place called Krishnanagar in Bangladesh in 1999. It's a picturesque village, on the bank of a beautiful river named Titash. Trilokya Som was called Naib, I have already said. His youngest daughter was Anima, who was some 8-9 months older than my Thakur. The two were close, the two were very close, and they used to play together. One morning my Thakur was walking towards the bank of Titash and Anima was following my Thakur. After reaching the immediate riverside, my Thakur didn't stop and continued walking on the surface of the river, the Titash river. And Anima followed suit, but as she stepped on the water, she started getting drowned. My Thakur looked back, and as a little child crouches down and squats on the floor, my Thakur was found sitting on the surface of Titash and holding Anima's hand and pulling her out of the water. At that time, a steamer from Narayanganj, motorized boat, which was headed towards Ujanchar, was nearing the bank, and people standing on the steamer launch started screaming at the sight of first a little girl getting drowned, and then exclaimed with profound wonder, seeing a little boy sitting on the flowing river and pulling out the girl from the depths of the river. Look, here it is a miracle to the ordinary eye, but from the standpoint of a yogi, my Thakur's dream state and waking state have overlapped. The boundary between these states of Vishwa and Teijasha has been blurred to such an extent that it is difficult to distinguish the two in my Thakur's case. Though my Thakur has spoken a lot of the dream state, we find very little mention from it about the deep sleep state. There's a mention in one of his discourses from the late 1950s, which was later published in a magazine called Vishwakalyan, which at that time used to publish discourses of my Thakur. Here in one of its edition of Vishwakalyan, he says that বসলাম আর 72 ঘন্টা পর উঠলাম, এইটুকুই বুঝলাম, মাঝখানে কোথায় যে ছিলাম বুঝলাম না, এই না পাওয়াটাই কি তাহলে পাওয়া? He says that he was drawn into samadhi and he emerged from that state 72 hours later. He couldn't tell where he actually was during these 3 days, and then he asks himself whether the state of confronting nothing is the ultimate find. Understood? Namo sikar sasasavapanda prabhusya prama brahmasya jagrita padvasi parsivaho janti sivasa samabedams sivasatama bendas vedamapithanam ramasya sabadidama. This incident of my Thakur comes closest which he can call the deep sleep state. The Ram that comes last in my Thakur's Ramnarayan Ram consists of this deep sleep state along with their sense of not confronting anything, which is the extension of the deep sleep state to the Turiya state. So while to me the mantra Om is incomplete as it consists of 3 parts instead of 4, where in the Upanishad it has already been said that it is Sho Hayam Atma Chatushpat, my Thakur's Ramnarayan Ram not only takes into consideration all the 4 states but also gives it more sharpness and power by installing the dream state before the waking state. Even my Thakur's idea, of giving liberation to a soul is mainly dependent on manipulating the dream state. But this process is quite cumbersome, and in the distant future is going to face some inevitable serious problems. My idea of liberation, on the other hand, is mainly banked on the concept of manipulating the deep sleep state. And most of my samadhi states these days deal with an area which is just beyond the deep sleep state.